The dramatic scene today outside the Supreme Court. Dueling protests, both sides making sure their voices are heard as the court hears the most important abortion case in decades. Tonight, the conservative court appears ready to break precedent and alter 30 years of settled law protecting a woman's right to end a pregnancy. We have complete coverage of what happened in court today and what it could mean for the future of Roe v. Wade. The Omicron variant has arrived here in the U.S., but tonight officials stress that is no reason to panic. What Dr. Fauci is saying about the first known case here in America and how Omicron may affect the holiday season. And demand for boosters now soars as some pharmacies run out of vaccines. Tonight, the harrowing new video of that school shooting in Michigan. Children rushing to get out of a classroom outside to safety. And a fourth student, just 17, has now died. What we're now learning about the 15-year-old suspect charged with murder and terrorism. Our in-depth look tonight at the debate over paid family leave in America. It's one thing both President Biden and former President Trump agreed on. So why hasn't anything changed? The Americans in limbo as Congress tries to come up with a solution.
It was so hard emotionally. It was hard financially in our family. I was 39, and so I felt like I worked my whole career leading up to these points where I was key leader. To give that up without a known timeline was really hard.
The ABC News exclusive, actor ALEC Baldwin's first exclusive interview since that deadly shooting incident on the set of the movie Rust. We have a sneak peek of his emotional conversation with George Stephanopoulos. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us tonight. Of course, we're tracking the Omicron variant, which is now confirmed here in the U.S. Much more on that in a moment. But we begin in Washington at the Supreme Court, where today the 9 justices heard the most direct challenge to abortion rights in America in decades. The outcome could fundamentally change the rights that women have to their own bodies. Outside the court, passionate protesters on both sides, abortion opponents praying and singing hymns, while abortion rights advocates held up signs like "Hands off my body." Inside the court, the conservative majority appears ready to break precedent and uphold Mississippi's restrictive abortion ban, and in the process, set the stage to overturn or dramatically weaken Roe v. Wade. Today, the justices sparred over that possibility and also the fate of the court itself if Roe were to be overturned. Justices Breyer and Sotomayor openly questioned the other precedents that could go next. According to our latest ABC News poll, 75% of Americans believe a woman and her doctor should make a decision about whether an abortion is necessary, not the government. And it's not only bringing a baby into the world under debate tonight. America is one of the only countries in the world that does not offer paid family leave. Much more on that in a moment. But first, our Devin Dwyer covers the courts for us and has more on the consequential case.
And we will abolish abortion. Hands off our bodies.
For religious and constitutional conservatives, it's a moment decades in the making.
And today we turn the page on Roe v. Wade.
Today, the Supreme Court's 6-3 conservative majority revisiting the landmark decision Roe versus Wade and the key question of when a state can ban abortion.
This is a critical moment. Like our rights are on the line right now. I also help women fund their abortions, and people are scared.
I was 15 weeks old once, and my mother chose to keep me. And I can handle a lot of things, but suffering isn't one of. Nobody likes pain. And at 15 weeks old, that baby feels pain exactly like we do.
As thousands turned out to rally, inside the court, the state of Mississippi pushed the justices to throw out a major precedent.
Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey haunt our country. They have no basis in the Constitution.
The pair of decisions in 1973 and later in 1992 saying states cannot ban abortion before a fetus is viable outside the womb, roughly 24 weeks of pregnancy. Mississippi wants to ban abortions after 15 weeks, and today the court's conservatives appeared open to the idea.
Why is 15 weeks not enough time? That's not a dramatic departure from viability.
Justice Brett Kavanaugh considered a key vote suggesting the court should retreat from abortion regulation altogether, letting each state decide.
The Constitution's neither pro-life nor pro-choice on the question of abortion. This court should be scrupulously neutral on the question of abortion.
But the court's liberals fired back on stare decisis, or the principle of letting decisions stand.
The right of a woman to choose, the right to control her own body, has been clearly set for since Casey and never challenged.
Justice Sonia Sotomayor warning overturning precedent would damage the court's reputation.
Will this institution survive the stench that this creates in the public perception that the Constitution and its reading are just political acts?
Abortion rights advocates warned of severe and swift potential impacts for millions of women, with Mississippi and 25 other states expected to ban or severely restrict abortion if the Supreme Court allows.
What will it say if the Supreme Court gets rid of the viability line? What will that mean in the states?
Well, that will really mean that state legislators will feel even more emboldened to ban abortion, to take more restrictions on abortion.
A majority of Americans want Roe versus Wade to stand. 3 in 4 say the choice to have an abortion should be left to a woman and her doctor.
How can you do this to your grandchild?
We saw firsthand this fall the emotional journey behind those decisions, the gauntlet of constant protests at Mississippi's only abortion clinic, and the gut-wrenching personal choice women face inside.
Some women of all ages, have to make this difficult decision in their life.
Nicole, who was 8 weeks pregnant when we met her, told us an abortion is not something any woman wants to have, but must be able to choose.
I do have other children, but I've also lost a child. And so having a child pass away of health issues, you don't want to bring it. You're scared.
27-year-old Erin, who asked not to use her real name, said she worries the right could soon disappear.
I wish there was more places like this, closer, just kind of everywhere.
Clinic director Shannon Brewer told us a Supreme Court decision rolling back almost 5 decades of abortion rights would force more women to take dangerous steps.
They wanted safe, legal abortions. Now you have safe, legal abortions. Now, guess what? You're going to throw all of that away to turn around and have unsafe, illegal abortions? Now you're going to have women dying, women showing up at the hospital, women hemorrhaging, women infections. That's what you're going to have.
As passions raged in the street, most justices today seemed ready to make a break from status quo.
What's most likely is that the Mississippi law is upheld by the court. The question, though, remains, what is the reasoning that they come to?
Legal scholars fixated on the court's new power center, Chief Justice Roberts and Justices Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett.
I think Kavanaugh seems quite convinced that there's a way, that the best way to minimize damage to the court's reputation when it comes to abortion is to let the states decide. That seemed fairly unambiguous to me. Barrett, as I mentioned, was a little bit harder to read. The Supreme Court is going to reverse Roe v. Wade this summer. That's my analysis coming out of this. I think that went about as well for Mississippi as it could have gone.
And after nearly 2 hours of arguments, abortion opponents emerged upbeat, while abortion rights supporters were notably subdued.
What if they try to come up with some kind of compromise? Would that be a good solution? There's no compromise.
There is a middle ground. This is a basic constitutional right about basic health care.
Shannon Brewer from Mississippi's clinic sounding a positive note, but with a dose of realism.
I listened to the arguments, and I think they did a great job at representing women today. And, we couldn't have asked for more with that. But otherwise, it's going to be a difficult road now.
Devin Dwyer joins us now. Devin, that conservative majority seeming to signal that they're going to uphold Mississippi's law. So what happens next with the court to reach a final decision?
Yeah, Lindsay, oral arguments are the first time the justices get to hear from each other on the issues in a case they don't discuss ahead of time. So today was just the beginning of the conversation on Mississippi's law and whether they'll roll back Roe versus Wade. This debate will continue in private. The justices will hold an initial vote. Then they'll begin the process of writing the opinions. That can take months. It's dynamic. In fact, some minds could potentially even change along the way. But we do expect to get that final decision sometime next spring, certainly before the end of June.
And the court still has not weighed in on the Texas abortions law, SB 8, that's effectively banned most abortions in that state. When should we expect movement on that?
Yeah, SB 8 was not mentioned once today, Lindsay, but it certainly hangs over all of this. The second most populous state banning virtually all abortions 3 months ago today. The court reviewed that case in a highly expedited emergency hearing, but they still have not weighed in on it. Most legal analysts I talked to said that case will likely get integrated with the Mississippi case, combined, if you will. So a major decision coming on abortion sometime later in the spring. And of course, that means that most abortions in the state of Texas could potentially remain out of reach for millions of women until that time. Lindsay?
Devin Dwyer, our thanks to you. And for more, we bring in ABC News contributor and Cardozo Law School professor Kate Shaw. Thanks so much for joining us, Kate. The big question tonight, did it sound like to you that the justices are going to overturn Roe v. Wade?
It did sound that way to me, Lindsay. You know, there are now 6 staunch conservative justices on the Supreme Court, which means you don't even need to keep all of the conservative justices in order to reach a conservative outcome. So even if there, you know, are one justice who is, you know, a little bit equivocating, all you need is 5 conservative justices to, you know, not just uphold the Mississippi law, but I think go further and overturn Roe and Casey. And it seemed to me that it was pretty easy to count to 5 today. So you had Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch. They've previously suggested they think that Roe was incorrectly decided and should be overturned. The big questions were Kavanaugh and Barrett. And both of them seemed to send strong signals to me that they were less interested in some sort of compromise than, you know, just actually going all the way and overturning Roe and Casey. So I do think that's the most likely outcome coming out of today's argument.
Chief Justice John Roberts will obviously cast a critical vote here. What did it mean, legally speaking, when he said that Mississippi's 15-week limit is not a, quote, dramatic departure from viability? Why was that statement so revealing?
It was an interesting moment. You know, Roberts was the one who seemed the most interested in this question of whether what the court could do is just to refashion the viability test. Remember, in Casey in '92, the Supreme Court held that states could regulate abortion, you know, throughout the duration of a pregnancy, but couldn't ban abortion after the, could not ban abortion, prior to the point of fetal viability. They could ban abortion after viability. So that line has remained an important part of the law of sort of constitutional protection for abortion since '92. And Roberts seemed to be suggesting, well, maybe we could just revisit that viability line. We don't have to say the Constitution doesn't protect any right to terminate a pregnancy. We can just say it's not quite as expansive a right as we have previously suggested, so states can do more to restrict abortion, including prior to viability. But to be honest, Lindsay, he seemed to be the only one who was really interested in that theory, as far as I could tell. The other conservative justices seemed more interested in going further and, you know, just overturning Roe outright.
And taking a step back, just explain for all of us why the Roe v. Wade court ruled at that time that women had a constitutional right to an abortion, and how could this court at this time change that landmark decision?
Sure. So in 1973, when the court decided Roe versus Wade, it had already decided in a series of cases that the Constitution, and in particular the liberty protected by the 14th Amendment, you know, protected people's ability to do all kinds of things free from undue government interference. So it conferred on people the right to control the rearing of their children. It protected your right to access contraception. So the court had already said, look, liberty in the Constitution protects things that might not be explicitly listed in the Constitution. Again, like, you know, child rearing and contraception. So it essentially extended that reasoning to the decision whether to continue with or to terminate a pregnancy, and said the liberty protected by the Constitution is expansive enough to encompass the decision whether to continue with a pregnancy and to bear a child. But the court also said in Roe, and even more clearly in Casey 20 years later, that's not an absolute right, right? There are also important state interests in potential fetal life. And that's essentially where this viability line came from, that, you know, after the point at which a fetus could live outside the womb, the state's interest in that life or that potential life is strong enough to allow states to prohibit abortion, even though that does infringe on the liberty of a person, of a woman who, you know, may prefer not to carry the pregnancy to term. So that's the basis for the 1973 ruling. But of course, the court does overturn its prior cases. It has done so many times in the past. And there's supposed to be kind of a calculation done of how correct the earlier opinion was, how much reliance there has been on the earlier opinion, how workable or unworkable that earlier test has proven. And so that's one of the big things that the two sides were sparring over. You know, has Roe supplied an enduring test? Was it correct? And has it been workable in practice? Mississippi says, no, it was wrong at the beginning and it hasn't been workable. And, you know, the challengers have said Roe was correctly decided as a matter of constitutional law and it should remain binding law.
Kate Shaw, our thanks to you. Appreciate your explanation, breaking it down for us.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Now to the latest on the pandemic, and the new Omicron variant has now been detected here in the U.S. The first case confirmed in California in a traveler who recently returned from South Africa. That person had been fully vaccinated before developing mild symptoms and then testing positive. It comes as the variant is spreading globally, but there's still much to learn on how harmful it might be. Here's ABC's Matt Gutman.
We have discovered our first case.
Tonight, that first confirmed case of Omicron in the United States. The traveler returned to the San Francisco area from South Africa on Monday, November 22nd, 3 days before Thanksgiving. And 2 days ago, the person reporting mild symptoms and is now recovering. That person was fully vaccinated with Moderna, but was not yet due for a booster shot. California's governor reporting aggressive contact tracing, and so far, all close contacts have tested negative. But the discovery increasing the national urgency to find out more about this variant.
We don't know how infectious it is, although there is a strong likelihood that it is more infectious than Delta. We don't know how sick it will make people, but that is being studied furiously right now across the world.
With Omicron now in the U.S., the Biden administration is planning to tighten rules for international travelers by requiring everyone, vaccinated or not, to be tested 1 day before boarding their flights to the U.S.
I think that would be a little better, yeah.
The CDC this morning directing airlines to provide contact information of passengers who have been in southern Africa. Omicron has been detected in at least 28 countries. And while health experts suspect it is highly transmissible, the World Health Organization says we could have some early data within days. The variant has 50 mutations, 30 on the virus's spike protein alone, and you can see in this image how different Omicron is from Delta.
The profile of the molecular profile of the kinds of mutations that you see would suggest, A, that it might be more transmissible and that it might elude some of the protection of vaccines. But we don't know that now. But I think any declaration of what will or will not happen with this variant, it is too early to say.
Tonight, health officials are urging unvaccinated Americans to get their shot now and the vaccinated to get their booster as soon as they're eligible. Dr. Fauci talking about the spike in antibodies in your system when you're boosted with that extra shot.
Boosting is really very important because the data that we get on boosting, if you look at the level, for example, of an antibody, a neutralizing antibody, peak following the second dose of a 2-dose mRNA, it's like at this level. If you look at the peak following the third shot boost, it goes way up here.
Nearly 30% of Americans who are eligible have gotten a booster shot, and demand is surging with concerns about the Omicron variant.
We were kind of a little bit lazy and didn't get our appointments set up yet, so this kind of pushed us forward.
While there is plenty of supply in the pipeline, some pharmacies temporarily running out.
I got a text, your appointment's been canceled.
Those boosters in high demand at this time. Matt Gutman joins us now from Los Angeles. Matt, you're learning more about that first patient in San Francisco. What do you know?
Lindsay, we just interviewed the doctor who sequenced that variant, and he said that that patient traveling in from South Africa arrived 3 days before Thanksgiving. Also, that this patient was, quote, very proactive, self-reporting to the San Francisco Department of Health. Now, interestingly, the doctor also said that the presence of Omicron in the United States is actually a good thing because they were able to sequence it. They now have a viable sample. What they're going to try to do with it is create cultures with it, try to basically replicate it as much as they can. That will help them run tests to determine whether it is, in fact, more transmissible and more virulent than Delta, or maybe not. But he cautions creating these cultures, doing all the samples and the testing, that will take several weeks. So we won't know for sure for a little while. Lindsay?
At least there is some upside here. Matt Gutman, our thanks to you. So. New details now on that tragic shooting at a high school in Michigan. The sheriff tells reporters that the shooter's parents had been in the school earlier that day. And now our first look at the teen who was arraigned today. ABC's Trevor Alt is in Michigan for us.
You are the parents of Ethan Crumley, is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Tonight, the Michigan 15-year-old accused of committing the deadliest school shooting this year arraigned as an adult on charges including first-degree murder and terrorism.
I am absolutely sure after reviewing the evidence that it isn't even a close call. It was absolutely premeditated.
Today, the sheriff revealing hours before the shooting, school officials met with the suspect and his parents about what the school thought was concerning behavior, but not a potential shooting.
Even the people that had the meetings wasn't on their radar? I don't believe so.
Authorities say the 15-year-old used a Sig Sauer 9mm his father bought just days before on Black Friday. It's unclear if he had permission to use it. He walked out of the bathroom and opened fire. This terrifying video showing a teacher and students who have trained for this inside their barricaded classroom. Escaping through a window after a knock on the door. And overnight, as authorities swarmed the suspect's home, recovering a notebook and some of his writings, a candlelight vigil for the victims. Authorities now confirming a fourth student has died of his injuries.
Justin Schilling, co-captain of the Oxford bowling team and a golfer.
16-year-old Tate Meir died in the squad car on the way to the hospital. His football team tweeting, Tate was a great young man with a bright future and beloved by all. It also killed 14-year-old Hannah St. Juliana.
Her father asked me to tell you that she was one of the happiest and most joyful kids.
And 17-year-old Madison Baldwin, whose family says she had just been accepted to several colleges.
She was just the light of so many people, and this is unimaginable. This is unmanageable.
Just so devastating. Trevor Alt joins us now from the school. Trevor, were there any potential warning signs missed about this teen's behavior?
Well, Lindsay, the consensus is that there are always some form of warning signs. Some of them can be difficult to pick up. Some of them, though, appear to be glaringly obvious after the fact. And one that they are pursuing, possibly, according to one law enforcement official, is they want more information about the fact that some students, the night before the shooting, watched a video on Snapchat warning of a shooting at school the next day. And in fact, some students then stayed home from school, but no calls, no tips were placed with police. Lindsay?
All right, Trevor Alt, our thanks to you for your reporting. We turn now to the FBI's first release of an interrogation video with an alleged Capitol rioter, where we see Danny Rodriguez breaking into tears as he admits that he tased police officer Michael Fanone. The man also says that he went there to do battle with Black Lives Matter protesters and Antifa, saying we were going to hit it like a civil war. Here's ABC's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas.
Tonight, for the first time, we see what prosecutors argue is a confession of one of the men accused of attacking and tasing D.C. police officer Michael Fanone, a symbol of the brutality against law enforcement the day of the insurrection.
Why did you tase him? I don't know. I'm a piece of I'm sorry. I don't know. He's a human being with children. And he's not a bad guy. He sounds like he's just doing his job. What do you want me to tell you, that I tased him? Yes.
The alleged attacker, Daniel Rodriguez, made clear why he was at the Capitol.
Trump called us, did you see? If he's the commander-in-chief and the leader of our country, and he's calling for help.
Fanone described to me the horror of the assault on him that day.
Yeah, they were beating me. At one point, I got tased. People were yelling out, we got one. People started chanting, kill him with his own gun.
In the moment, you had to make split-second life and death decisions.
Oh, absolutely.
Pierre Thomas joins us now. Pierre, what has this alleged rioter been charged with, and what's he now saying about this confession?
Lindsay, he has pled not guilty, and his attorneys are fighting to get the FBI interrogation blocked from evidence, claiming he was not read his Miranda rights. If convicted of assaulting the officer and conspiracy, he faces more than a decade in prison.
Pierre Thomas, our thanks to you. Now to a new report that former President Trump tested positive for COVID just 3 days before his first debate with Joe Biden in the fall of 2020. A British newspaper quoting a new book by the former president's chief of staff, Mark Meadows. But what had former President Trump told our own Jonathan Karl for his book on whether he had tested positive before the debate? Here's John Karl.
It's a shocking claim, and it comes from then-President Trump's loyal chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who writes in an upcoming book obtained by The Guardian that Trump tested positive for COVID-19 on September 26th last year, 3 days before he took the stage with Joe Biden for their first debate. Meadows writes that he got the call just after Trump took off on Marine One for a campaign event in Pennsylvania in an urgent call from White House doctor Sean Conley. Stop the president from leaving, Meadows writes that Conley told him, according to The Guardian, he just tested positive for COVID. Meadows says Trump was tired and appeared to have a slight cold, but that he was determined to debate Biden no matter what, writing, quote, nothing was going to stop Trump from going out there. Today, our Mary Bruce asked President Biden about that.
Do you think the former president put you at risk?
I don't think about the former president.
Back in March, I had heard unconfirmed reports of such a positive test and asked Trump about it in an interview for my book, Betrayal. He flatly denied it. Some people say you first got it, you got an initial positive test even before the debate. Is that true or is that not true?
No, that's not true.
Trump saying that did not happen. Jonathan Karl joins us now. John, but Meadows writes that the second test came back negative. Is that right?
He says that the sample was tested again on a different machine, and that second test came back negative, so Trump was left with one positive and one negative test. Of course, he charged ahead and did the debate anyway, and as you remember, it was just a few days later that Trump told the world that he did, in fact, have coronavirus, and he was soon on his way to the Walter Reed Medical Center.
And we heard from former President Trump today on Meadows' claim. How's he responding?
He's denouncing as fake news the idea that he had COVID during the debate. Of course, that's not exactly what Meadows reports. Meadows reports that there was a positive test, but there was also a negative test. He doesn't say whether or not it was conclusive one way or the other, whether or not he was, in fact, infected at the time of his debate with Biden.
Jonathan Karl, our thanks to you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
And when we come back, the ABC News exclusive, Alec Baldwin and George Stephanopoulos one-on-one, how he describes the moment a cinematographer died while rehearsing a scene. With abortion in the headlines tonight, we also take a look at the debate over paid family leave. Should America, as the world's richest nation, do more to help families as they grow? But up next, the wife of a famed music executive killed inside their Beverly Hills home. The investigation next.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
It was a scary time. In the 70s, you had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
There were so many murders happening. You had to have a name for it, serial killer.
There was a human head in there. This was premeditated evil.
You have this clock. This person is going to do this again.
It's me against the killer. Who's going to win?
We'll see who laughs last.
What came next was unlike anything they had ever seen.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I risked my life. I put my family in danger. If I was caught, they would have put a bullet in my head. But it was the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do.
Terror plot foiled in Garden City, Kansas.
That would have been one of the most deadly acts of domestic terrorism ever in the United States. It would have been Oklahoma City.
He put his family, himself, in jeopardy for us.
Assault on the Capitol, the ABC News original, exclusively on Hulu, now streaming. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
National parks are incredibly safe places. Crime will happen.
Hey, my wife had fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now.
I was shocked.
Something's not right.
Take a look at this horrifying home explosion earlier today in Brooklyn, New York. The massive blast shook the entire neighborhood and collapsed the first floor of a home. Investigators are still unsure how it all began. 6 people were hurt and dozens left homeless, but no one was killed. Now to a terrifying and sad story out of Hollywood. Jacqueline Avant, the wife of famed music executive Clarence Avant, killed at home. Jacqueline and her husband are both known for the influence that they've had on some of the biggest names in music and politics. ABC's Will Carr brings us the details.
Tonight, a shocking murder in Beverly Hills. Jacqueline Avant, the wife of legendary music executive Clarence Avant, killed overnight in her home.
The motives in this case are still unknown, and we are investigating all possible motives.
Around 2:30 a.m., police receiving a phone call about a shooting near the Avant's residence. When officers arrived, they say the suspects were gone. They found 81-year-old Jacqueline with a gunshot wound. She later died at the hospital. Clarence Avant is a Grammy-winning executive. He was just inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Called the godfather of black music, he was known for his mentorship. He's the founder of 2 record labels, launching the careers of artists like Bill Withers, famous for the songs Lean on Me and Ain't No Sunshine. He and his wife were married for 54 years and have 2 children.
So many were introduced to his wife and children in that documentary. Will Carr joins us now. Will, where was Clarence Avant at the time of the shooting?
Authorities here in Beverly Hills, Lindsay, say that he and a security guard were at home at the time of the shooting. Tonight, they say they're still looking for the suspects and they're asking for the public's help. It comes as celebrities like Magic Johnson and Tyler Perry are offering their condolences. Lindsay.
Will Carr, our thanks to you. Still ahead here on Prime, the tense moments outside the trial for a former police officer as a car drives through a crowd of protesters. Could Major League Baseball be close to a lockdown? And on this World AIDS Day, we look at the huge strides made in fighting this virus by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day from Spotify. Seems like many of us were once again all about Bad Bunny.
It's an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new hunt wherever you get your podcasts.
It was a scary time. In the 70s, you had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
There were so many murders happening. You had to have a name for it, serial killer.
There was a human head in there. This was premeditated evil.
You have this clock. This person is going to do this again.
It's me against the killer. Who's going to win?
We'll see who laughs last.
What came next was unlike anything they had ever seen.
World News Now.
And America This Morning.
The best new video.
The breaking news overnight.
Emergency crews called to the town of Surfside.
U.S. airstrikes hitting targets in Iraq and Syria.
The stories people are talking about.
If you don't want to shave your legs, don't. I was going to say,
oh my. Got it.
And what to expect in the day ahead.
ABC World News Now and America This Morning.
Starting at 2 a.m. Eastern.
Up all night to keep you up to date.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions, straightforward reporting, no spin, no hype, no bull. See why Sunday mornings, more and more Americans are now turning first to ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos.
Welcome to This Week.
When you wake up in the morning, when you wake up in the morning, darling, I'll be by your side. I'll be there by your side. I'll be everything you wanted. I'll be there by your side. If you need a light to shine in, hold up your hand, let the stars shoot again, let the light shine in through the dark.
Good morning, America.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back. We're surrounded by people
Squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us. Welcome back, everyone. Today is World AIDS Day. We remember the many lives lost, but we also recognize how far we've come in this fight and recommit to doing more. Here's a look by the numbers. 36 million, that's now the global death toll from AIDS, including 700,000 people here in the U.S., a staggering loss. But since HIV was first discovered in 1983, when it was essentially a death sentence, scientists have made significant headway in diagnosis and treatment. Today, nearly 38 million people live with HIV around the world. 1.2 million are in the U.S., including celebrities like Billy Porter and Jonathan Van Ness, who publicly disclosed their HIV-positive status this year, hoping to destigmatize the virus. This virus still hits some communities harder than others. African Americans account for 42% of all those newly diagnosed in 2019, while gay and bisexual men accounted for 83% of the young people newly diagnosed, according to the CDC. And while there's still no cure or vaccine for HIV after decades of research, medications called antiretroviral therapy can help people with HIV live a healthy, normal lifespan, and they can reduce their viral loads so that they're not contagious to others. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. Could Russia be setting the stage for a military invasion? We'll explain. And the consumer alert for those looking to buy a home that you ought to hear. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
Powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
It's an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new hunt wherever you get your podcasts.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
National parks are incredibly safe places. A crime will happen.
Hey, Mama. My wife is fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now.
I was shocked.
Something's not right.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
Seems to change just about every day.
what is it that you really want to know, need to know,
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, What You Need to Know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart that he did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back. We're surrounded by people.
Squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
The new Omicron variant detected in at least 24 countries, according to the World Health Organization, now in the U.S. The CDC reporting its first confirmed case in California and a vaccinated traveler who recently returned from South Africa. Dr. Anthony Fauci discussing the discovery.
The individual was fully vaccinated and experienced mild symptoms, which are improving at this point. We knew that it was just a matter of time before the first case of Omicron would be detected in the United States.
The first American case comes as the Biden administration works to prevent others. The White House reportedly considering tightening the testing requirements for those entering the U.S. by having all travelers tested one day before their flights, regardless of their vaccination status. The CDC, meanwhile, ramping up COVID testing at major U.S. airports in New York, Atlanta, Newark, and San Francisco, offering optional free PCR tests to travelers coming from South Africa and India. And scientists in labs now aggressively scouring through positive COVID samples, looking for those many mutations specific to the Omicron strain.
We will know immediately when we see it.
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, wrapping up NATO meetings in Europe, said the U.S. is deeply concerned by evidence that Russian troops are mobilizing on the Ukrainian border.
Now, we don't know whether President Putin has made the decision to invade. We do know that he is putting in place the capacity to do so on short order, should he so decide. So despite uncertainty about intentions and timing, we must prepare for all contingencies while working to see to it that Russia reverses course. We've made it clear to the Kremlin that we will respond resolutely, including with a range of high-impact economic measures that we've refrained from using in the past.
Actor Alec Baldwin breaking his silence after that deadly shooting on a movie set. Sitting down with our George Stephanopoulos, Baldwin was asked about the moment cinematographer Helena Hutchins was shot and killed while rehearsing a scene.
It wasn't in the script for the trigger to be pulled.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them, never.
Baldwin says he had no reason to suspect the gun contained a live bullet and has no idea how it got there. Authorities, of course, are investigating the shooting. Alec Baldwin Unscripted airs tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern, then streaming on Hulu.
Day 2 of jury selection for the former police officer who says she mistook a gun for her taser when she killed Daunte Wright. Meanwhile, tense moments outside the courthouse last night. A car pushed through demonstrators who were demanding justice for Wright. Several of the protesters banged on the vehicle as it slowly forced itself forward. No one was hurt in the incident, and police say they're not trying to track down the driver now because they say the protesters did not have a permit to block off the street.
Major League Baseball may be on the brink of its first work stoppage since 1994.
Major League Baseball could lock out its players at midnight if the sides do not agree to a new collective bargaining agreement. With more than 2 months until the start of spring training, games are not yet under threat, but some players said the labor uncertainty made them eager to sign contracts before the deadline.
What's wrong with this picture? There's no snow. As the winter season begins, only 10% of the U.S. is covered by snow, the second lowest snow total since 2003. The lack of precipitation impacting everything from ski resorts to the ongoing drought. In Denver, temperatures averaging as much as 6 degrees higher than normal. The city hasn't seen its first measurable snow and has gone snowless for more than 220 consecutive days, a record that goes back over 130 years. Colorado's Steamboat Ski Resort delaying its opening until after Thanksgiving. The lack of snow extending to Oregon and California. Ski resorts there remaining closed. Meanwhile, more than 97% of the western U.S. is experiencing drought conditions with no sign of relief.
Welcome back, everyone. Senate conservatives, led by Utah's Mike Lee, are setting the stage for a possible government shutdown. He and a few others are defying GOP leadership and insisting that any government funding bill not be used to implement the president's COVID vaccine rules. The shutdown could begin Friday at midnight, and at this time is expected to be brief. Now to the flashpoint issue that impacts millions of Americans, the heated battle over paid family leave, which is now a major sticking point in the president's Build Back Better agenda. ABC's Karen Travers reports.
Sebastian McLemore arrived on October 22nd, born 6 weeks early.
Look at how tight these hands are.
Sebastian spent nearly a month in a neonatal intensive care unit, or NICU, in Philadelphia. His parents, Martin and Gabrielle, constantly by his side.
The grind of being here for now 3 weeks and 4 days, it starts to wear on you.
Anxiously awaiting the day they could bring him home.
I got to see his face without the nasal feeding tube, and I'm just like, I'm over the moon. It means he's one step closer to coming home.
We're looking at going home on Thursday, which, sorry.
Sebastian's parents say they're more fortunate than many. They get some paid leave from their employers. An assistant district attorney, Martin, has 8 weeks paid leave. Gabrielle works for a retail and wedding small business. Her boss is giving her 10 weeks at roughly 80% of her normal pay. But for 4 of those weeks, Sebastian was in the hospital.
That really cuts into the time I thought that I'd spend bonding with him and working on like nursing and all those things that we couldn't really work on in the NICU.
Martin and Gabrielle were in the NICU when they learned that Congress had scrapped federal paid family leave from the Build Back Better proposal. They were outraged.
It's a week since I've delivered, and I'm in jeans and sitting in an uncomfortable chair in the NICU and thinking about, like, how could I physically be expected to work at this moment?
Martin and Gabrielle telling me they saw some babies left in the NICU during the week, their families only able to visit on weekends.
They're talking to the nurses about, like, oh, how were they this week? And, oh, we wish we could be here, but our jobs only allow a certain amount of time.
Researchers at the World Policy Analysis Center study the issue of paid family leave.
The question of why we don't have it is one that countries around the world are asking.
The United States is one of just 7 countries in the world without national paid maternity leave. 186 countries guarantee new mothers paid leave from work. The average paid time off, 31 weeks. 109 countries guarantee new fathers paid leave. The average time off is 29 weeks. And 181 countries guarantee paid sick leave, more than 2/3 providing 12 weeks or more.
The history here is really a history of lots of efforts just to get unpaid leave passed. And the problem has always been getting Congress to act. Americans across parties support paid leave.
Americans like Jessica Kim, a mother of 3 from Boston. She was working full-time as an executive in children's book publishing when her mother got pancreatic cancer.
I was draining her stomach several times a day. I was feeding her and bathing her, eventually carrying her, and then also managing all the finances and insurance and logistics. It was the hardest, the most exhausting, loneliest time in my life.
Jessica tells us she didn't share with colleagues what she was juggling.
I just had this fear of it reflecting on, my dedication to work.
Eventually, it became too much, and Jessica left her job to care full-time for her mother.
It was so hard emotionally. It was hard financially in our family. I was 39, and so I felt like I worked my whole career leading up to these points where I was key leader. To give that up without a known timeline was really hard.
Jessica's mother passed away in 2017. She channeled her experience into action, creating an app where caregivers can mobilize friends and family for help and connect to local services.
IoniCare is that front door. It's that first step to unlocking all the different layers of support that exist in the home environment.
No one should have to choose between a job and a paycheck, or taking care of themselves and their loved ones, or parent or spouse or child.
President Biden pledged to make things easier for millions of Americans who are caregivers like Jessica or new parents like Martin and Gabrielle. His Build Back Better plan called for 12 weeks of federal paid family leave. But after months of negotiations, the House passed a social spending plan that includes 4 weeks of paid family leave.
4 weeks is absolutely better than nothing, but it's important to realize we don't have quality infant care at 4 weeks old. And it's also important to realize that if someone has cancer, they need more than 4 weeks leave when they're sick.
That House bill faces an uphill battle in the Senate, with Democrat Joe Manchin, a critical vote, opposed to the provision.
I want paid leave to be worked in a separate piece of legislation, and I think there's a bipartisan pathway forward.
Critics of federal paid leave usually cite the cost, an estimated $200 billion over 10 years for 4 weeks leave.
One of the main concerns about what has been proposed recently is that it really will crowd out private benefits that are already provided by employers. And so the idea that the federal government will come in and take over the administration of those benefits at a very high cost can be very concerning.
The Family Medical Leave Act, what we have right now, is unpaid. And that, again, leaves out tens of millions of Americans who can't afford it.
Right now, fewer than 1/4 of private sector workers have access to paid family leave. So for millions of Americans, this is so much more than just another political debate.
Paid leave would have been a game changer. I felt like I was pushed into a corner to decide, am I going to work or am I going to care for my mom?
It shouldn't be lucky that we get to spend time with him. Everyone should get to spend time with a new baby.
But Martin and Gabrielle's leave is running out fast, just days after they finally got to take their newborn home.
If you had 30 seconds to sit down with somebody at the center of this, what would you say to them?
Strong families do make the country stronger. I don't know a better argument for our legislators.
Karen Travers, ABC News, Philadelphia.
Our thanks to Karen for that. Now to political news. Stacey Abrams announced today she is running for governor of Georgia in 2022. It is her second bid for governor and sets the table for a possible rematch with GOP Governor Brian Kemp, whom she lost to by a razor-thin margin in 2018. Abrams credits her loss to Georgia's restrictive voter registration and voter purges. She launched the Fair Fight Voter Protection Organization, which likely helped Joe Biden win Georgia in 2020. If she were to win the governor's race, Abrams could become the nation's first black female governor. Home sales have skyrocketed during the pandemic. According to the National Association of Realtors, property sales were up nearly 19% in October compared to March of 2020. Many of these buyers are first-time homeowners and potential targets for those looking to take advantage of their inexperience. ABC's Alex Perez has the details.
An alert for homeowners across the country on how to avoid wasting money during the pandemic housing boom.
This process was very new to us.
First-time buyers Reed Nussbaum and his wife were thrilled with their new home sweet home until this letter they received from Local Records LLC led to a bitter experience they didn't expect.
This letter that we got seemed legitimate, and it says that they provide a copy of the documents under our name as property owners.
So Nussbaum responded, writing a check for $89, believing he had to pay the fee to obtain a copy of the deed to his house. He missed the 2 notes on the letter that Local Records has not been approved or endorsed by any government agency.
So it wasn't until we received a second letter that I thought anything of it. It was from a different state, and it had all the same information on it, and I looked at my wife and I thought, I think we've been had. So.
Lately, we've been seeing a precipitous rise in the number of these that are landing in people's mailboxes.
Mike Ingram is a county recorder in Illinois, not far from where Nussbaum lives.
Champaign County Recorder of Deeds.
Here in this record room, Ingram has property records going back to the 1830s.
You can go to your local records offices that exist within your county and you can get this information for free. And that's why these companies are able to do this, is because they're accessing that same public information and they're just trying to get you to pay them for getting it for you.
Nussbaum was able to get a full refund from the company after the Better Business Bureau stepped in.
It could appear that that piece of mail is coming from your own hometown. They could be just using a local address. The big warning to consumers is when you receive any kind of unsolicited mail, make sure they have a brick and mortar location.
Double checking that address can save you a headache and money. The return address on some of those letters sent by companies selling property deeds was one of these, a local UPS store. Clearly not the official county recorder's office.
On the Better Business Bureau website, Local Records LLC has had an F rating since 2014. ABC News reached out to them. They declined to answer. The company has had run-ins with authorities before. According to court documents, Juan Romero, one of the registered owners, settled with North Carolina prosecutors by agreeing to stop sending misleading letters, and Washington State fining the company for violating deceptive practices laws.
Our thanks to Alex for that. Before we go tonight, the image of the day, a girl in Calcutta, India, lighting earthen lamps to commemorate the global fight against AIDS. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Coming up in the next hour, we're staying on top of a few things, including, as we suspected, the Omicron variant has been detected inside the U.S., what we know. And mega author Patricia Cornwell on how the pandemic helped her reimagine one of her most popular characters.
More Americans choose ABC News, America's #1 news source. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
Seems to change just about every day.
what is it that you really want to know, need to know,
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter,
feel better.
feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America? GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
The ladies you love, the hottest topics happening now. There's only one place to find it all.
You guys are having the hard conversations. I love The View.
The most watched #1 daytime talk show is The View. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It was a scary time. In the 70s, you had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
There were so many murders happening. You had to have a name for it, serial killer.
There was a human head in there. This was premeditated evil.
We have this clock. This person is going to do this again.
It's me against the killer. Who's going to win?
We'll see who laughs last.
What came next was unlike anything they had ever seen.
When you wake up in the morning, when you wake up in the morning, darling, I'll be by your side. I'll be there by your side. I'll be everything you wanted. I'll be there by your side. If you need a light to shine.
ABC News, honored winner of 9 Edward R. Murrow Awards, more than any other network, including winning for the 3rd straight year the award for overall excellence in television. ABC News is America's #1 news source. With so much at stake, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 newscast and the #1 program on television.
Hi there, I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We're monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. Democrats today in the House pummeled Republican leader Kevin McCarthy over his inability to rein in warring members. South Carolina lawmaker Nancy Mace condemned fellow freshman Colorado's Lauren Boebert for making anti-Muslim remarks against Minnesota Democrat Ilhan Omar. But Georgia's Marjorie Taylor Greene condemned Mace for criticizing someone in her own party. This as Democrats say there are active discussions underway to hold Boebert accountable for her comments. The FBI is releasing the first interrogation video of an alleged Capitol rioter breaking down and crying while admitting that he tased an officer. Danny Rodriguez says he went there to do battle with Black Lives Matter protesters and Antifa, and that he felt like he was backing up former President Trump. He has pled not guilty, and his attorneys want this video removed from evidence, claiming he was not read his Miranda rights. And in the sex trafficking trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, the defense is trying to poke holes in the memory of the prosecution's key accuser. Maxwell's attorney claims that the accuser told government prosecutors a different story than what she said at trial. The witness, who goes by Jane, claims she was just 14 years old when she met Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. Now to the pandemic, and the new Omicron variant has been detected here in the U.S. The first case confirmed in California in a traveler who recently returned from South Africa. That person had been fully vaccinated before developing mild symptoms and then testing positive. It comes as the variant is spreading globally, but there is still much to learn as far as how harmful it might be. Here's ABC's Matt Gutman.
We have discovered our first case.
Tonight, that first confirmed case of Omicron in the United States. The traveler returned to the San Francisco area from South Africa on Monday, November 22nd, 3 days before Thanksgiving. And 2 days ago, the person reporting mild symptoms and is now recovering. That person was fully vaccinated with Moderna, but was not yet due for a booster shot. California's governor reporting aggressive contact tracing, and so far, all close contacts have tested negative. But the discovery increasing the national urgency to find out more about this variant.
We don't know how infectious it is, although there is a strong likelihood that it is more infectious than Delta. We don't know how sick it will make people, but that is being studied furiously right now across the world.
With Omicron now in the U.S., the Biden administration is planning to tighten rules for international travelers by requiring everyone, vaccinated or not, to be tested 1 day before boarding their flights to the U.S.
I think that would be a little better, yeah.
The CDC this morning directing airlines to provide contact information of passengers who have been in southern Africa. Omicron has been detected in at least 28 countries. And while health experts suspect it is highly transmissible, the World Health Organization says we could have some early data within days. The variant has 50 mutations, 30 on the virus's spike protein alone, and you can see in this image how different Omicron is from Delta.
The profile of the molecular profile of the kinds of mutations that you see would suggest, A, that it might be more transmissible, and that it might elude some of the protection of vaccines. But we don't know that now. But I think any declaration of what will or will not happen with this variant, it is too early to say.
Tonight, health officials are urging unvaccinated Americans to get their shot now and the vaccinated to get their booster as soon as they're eligible. Dr. Fauci talking about the spike in antibodies in your system when you're boosted with that extra shot.
Boosting is really very important because the data that we get on boosting, if you look at the level, for example, of an antibody, a neutralizing antibody, peak following the second dose of a 2-dose mRNA, it's like at this level. If you look at the peak following the third shot boost, it goes way up here.
Nearly 30% of Americans who are eligible have gotten a booster shot, and demand is surging with concerns about the Omicron variant.
We were kind of a little bit lazy and didn't get our appointments
set up yet, so this kind of pushed us forward.
While there is plenty of supply in the pipeline, some pharmacies temporarily running out.
I got a text, your appointment's been canceled.
Those boosters in high demand are thanks to MAD. And now to that major hearing at the Supreme Court today over the fate of Roe versus Wade. The justices sparring over a challenge to a Mississippi law on abortion, leaving court watchers doubting whether the decades-old landmark ruling will stand. Here's ABC's Terry Moran, who covers the court, and the audio of just what the justices had to say.
At the Supreme Court today, the first signs that Roe versus Wade's days may be numbered. Outside the court, protesters gathered, while inside, the justices heard arguments on that Mississippi law that bans most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy, no exceptions for rape or incest. Roe versus Wade established a woman's constitutional right to have an abortion, and if the court upholds the Mississippi law, it would undermine or overrule Roe altogether. To date, it seemed clear the conservative justices are ready to do exactly that. Chief Justice John Roberts zeroing in on a key issue, viability. Right now, Roe and other cases prohibit states from banning abortion before viability, about 24 weeks. Roberts saying Mississippi's ban on abortions after 15 weeks gives women plenty of time to choose.
Viability, it seems to me, doesn't have anything to do with choice. But if it really is an issue about choice, why is 15 weeks not enough time?
Justice Brett Kavanaugh suggested the states or Congress and not the Supreme Court should be the final arbiters.
Why should this court be the arbiter rather than Congress, the state legislatures, state Supreme Courts, the people being able to resolve this? And there'll be different answers in Mississippi and New York.
Making the case for the Biden administration, Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar said that would set women's rights in America back decades.
For a half-century, this court has correctly recognized that the Constitution protects a woman's fundamental right to decide whether to end a pregnancy before viability.
Justice Sonia Sotomayor, with the two other liberals on the court, warned of dire consequences if Roe is overturned or gutted.
Will this institution survive the stench that this creates in the public perception that the Constitution and its reading are just political acts? I don't see how it is possible.
Justice Sotomayor putting it out there, saying that she believes the court's reputation is on the line. Terry Moran joins us now. And Terry, we heard certainly a lot from the justices today, but how much tea leaf reading can we do when we hear these oral arguments?
You know, Lindsay, usually not so much, especially on a hot-button issue like abortion. They tend to be very careful in their oral arguments, prodding, looking for openings. But today was totally different. The conservatives, one after another, were essentially saying, look, Roe is a weak decision constitutionally. They don't like it. They think it's easy to overturn. They say lots of other cases have been overturned in Supreme Court history. You could feel the momentum building through this argument as the conservatives aimed higher and higher. What was so striking was that they weren't, in the end, really discussing the question of whether to overturn or gut Roe versus Wade. They were really discussing how to do it.
How to do it, exactly. All right. And Terry, there's obviously so much at stake here, especially for women who right now might be seeking abortion services. When might the court decide this case, and then also the separate challenge to the Texas abortion law?
Well, Lindsay, this case will likely be decided at the very end of the court's term. That'll be June. That's when most of the big cases come down. The Texas case was brought on an emergency appeal. They've taken their time with that. The women of Texas right now are essentially being denied a constitutional right they still have. The court doesn't seem to be in any rush, but that'll come down before, I would say, by the end of the year, although I've been wrong on that. And then what will the country look like? You know, come June, if things go as it seemed they were going in this in the arguments today, it's going to be a very different America for women and for people, for reproductive rights in general. There are many states lined up, ready to go, with laws just like Mississippi or others in order to get this court's approval and to move ahead with what the project has been for evangelical Christians and conservative Republicans for decades, and that is to eliminate abortion in America. It'll be more of a patchwork situation, but that is their goal, and it looks today as if they will get a chance to pursue it. Lindsay?
Monumental decision there with so much at stake. Terry Moran, our thanks to you. Now to Sandra Bullock, opening up about her experience as a mother of 2 black children. On a new episode of Red Table Talk, the Oscar winner says that she sometimes wishes that her kids had the same skin color. ABC's Kaylee Hartung has this story.
One of Hollywood's most beloved and private actresses opening up about what it's like to be a white mother to the 2 black children she's adopted.
To say that I wish our skins matched, sometimes I do.
Yeah,
because then it would be easier on how people approach us.
In an exclusive clip from the newest episode of Red Table Talk, the Oscar winner Sandra Bullock making this personal confession about her children. Son Louis Bardo adopted in 2010 and Layla in 2015. Seen here in a previous episode of Red Table Talk last year.
Have people ever been like, well, Sandy, why would you adopt 2 black children? You know, did you ever
no
feel
one
that
would say,
judgment?
but no one would say that to my face.
But
you guess what? You get the racism. You get the. You get. There's been, sure, a lot of it.
Yeah.
Guess what? Not my problem.
40% of adopted children are of a different race than their adoptive parents.
For all transracial adoptive parents who have kids from different backgrounds, they will come up sooner or later to situations that make them uncomfortable.
Don't you dare lie to me. The Blind Side star saying she hopes some people's perceptions will change.
And I have the same feelings as a woman with brown skin, being her babies, or a white woman with, white babies. But
it's the mother-child dynamic relationship. You don't have to put a color on.
And maybe one day that will go away. Maybe one day we will be able to see with different eyes.
And we are now joined by renowned author Patricia Cornwell. She is relaunching her electrifying, best-selling, thrilling series that follows Dr. Kay Scarpetta in another suspense-filled installment called Autopsy. With more than 115 million books sold worldwide in more than 120 countries and 29 New York Times bestsellers, Cornwell has kept us on the edge of our seats in suspense for decades now. Thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Cornwell.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, so take us back. It was 2016. You really kind of decided you were going to quit Dr. Scarpetta, right? Although you in turn said now that she really had fired you.
I think she did. I think she knew what she was doing, too.
It sounds like it's working out, really.
Well, it is working out, and I'll tell you why. I don't know how the book's going to do. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. But most of all, this going away and doing something else for a while and just jumping into the world of outer space and the new technologies and all the things, artificial intelligence, whatever. What I realized, after I got away from Scarpetta for 4 or 5 years and doing this kind of research, and then COVID is what caused me to go back to her. And I thought, you've got a whole new bag of tricks you can do with this lady, because we can work a death in outer space. Because, science is science, and up there, everything's physics. And just to give you a quick example, blood drips because of gravity. So imagine in weightlessness in outer space, what's going to happen to a crime scene? And I didn't really think much about that long ago, because why would Scarpetta, be dealing with somebody dying in outer space? Well, today that could really happen, and I show you what that's like in this new one.
But why did the pandemic actually inspire you to resurrect this character?
Well, like a lot of people, the pandemic was a game changer for me personally. Some people quit work during the pandemic and retired and are never going back. For me, what it made me realize is that there's a lot that I still want to do, and Scarpetta is my strongest voice. And I started thinking, I had some time out. I'd finished the 2 space thrillers. The last one came out in January. I was trying some screenwriting, and then I said, you're in lockdown. I don't even know what's going to happen to this planet. But what do you want to do, and what would make sense and be meaningful? And I thought, what would Dr. Scarpetta do in this world today? If we threw her right into the same one we're living in with COVID, with January 6th, with the monuments being torn down in Richmond and the divisiveness in our society, and also the problems in space, because the space race is a really big thing, and there are already crimes being committed up there. It's just they're being committed from the ground. But there's going to be a day when we do have death, violence, tragedy beyond the surface of this planet. I'm surprised it hasn't happened, and we hope it doesn't, but it will, because humans will take their tragedies, their trials, their triumphs. We will take all of it with us everywhere we go.
And you've given us a little hint as far as the crime scene in space goes, but give us a little more of a taste of Autopsy and why you've compared it to Coke Classic.
It's Coke Classic because when I decided, okay, let's bring Scarpetta back, let's go back to what worked so well in the beginning. So I literally pulled out Postmortem, my very first one, and I looked at it, I went through it, and I thought, what about this works so well? And what about things that maybe didn't work as well later on in the series? And one thing I do know, people like a sense of place, and especially these days. That's why shows that are set in small towns are popular. We want to be hugged by something. All this remote stuff is difficult. So let's put them back in Virginia, where it all started. It's an emotional landscape. It's something I also know really well. Put them outside of Washington, though, so Scarpetta can be involved in the Doomsday Commission, which has to do with the sorts of threats that top secret people would talk about, the what ifs, like with cyber attacks, or if you weaponized a virus, let's just say, or what about, you know, the Russian doll satellites, when a satellite goes up and it opens and another one comes out and it opens and another, and then a weapon comes out. These are the kinds of things that those kinds of people talk about. So she, in the middle of serial murders happening in Northern Virginia, where she is the new chief medical examiner again, then she gets called to the White House because of a disaster in space that she has to guide astronauts through as to how to deal with it remotely. And then, of course, there are other things that go on, but all of it was to bring her back, make it old, but make it really new. And I think I feel very good about that. I think those people, the readers who have always liked the earlier Scarpettas, I think they're gonna like this a lot.
But you've said, and it's important to bring up to our viewers, that you don't have to read all 24 books before you get to this.
No, I didn't even have to read them to write it. It's a good thing. I don't have time to read 24 books. No, in fact, if you've never read a Scarpetta, this is the one to start with. And if you've only read a few, it absolutely doesn't matter. I wrote this to relaunch the series, and it's the characters you love. It's Scarpetta, Marino, Scarpetta's sister Dorothy, of course Lucy. Lucy's involved in artificial intelligence, and there's a scene there that's going to really shock people when they see what she's doing. And it's just, I'm so pleased with it. You know, this was COVID's gift to me. I would not have done this book. I would not have brought Scarpetta back. I was done 5 years ago. I even got rid of a lot of my old forensic books, because I thought, I'm not doing this anymore. I don't need some of this stuff.
But then you ended up going to NASA to actually really put on your researcher hat for this. And I'm curious, just to get a sense, because you started as a reporter at the Charlotte Observer, how your background as a reporter really shapes your writing as a storyteller.
I would not be here today if I had not started out as a journalist. Journalism taught me how to go looking for a story until it finds you. And you gotta go look. It just makes you got to go do something. You can't just sit there and wait for inspiration to land on your shoulder like a bird. And so when I really was going to put Scarpetta in this, and one of the things I also did, in fact, this pin I have on is given to me by Jack Fisher, an astronaut who was on the space station, and he's kind of my astro coach. And we talked a lot about what would it look like up there? Like, what does water do in outer space? What does blood do? What if someone gets injured? Tell me how these things look when you've got no gravity and with a gunfire. There's a lot of things and so, you know, that's one of the things I did too.
And we just have about 30 seconds left, but I would like to also talk about Jamie Lee Curtis and your involvement making this in TV. Why now? Tell me what you're most excited about this new venture.
The thing I'm most excited about is that Jamie Lee Curtis is involved in it. She's a powerhouse. I've known her for a number of years. She's familiar with Scarpetta. She read Autopsy way back in the spring when I finished it, and I sent her the manuscript and she read it, and she called and she said, you know, she said, we should be doing this as a TV series. And I said, I was hoping you were going to ask.
Super excited about that. In the meantime, Autopsy, available wherever books are sold. Patricia Cornwell, we thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And still to come, the daring rescue at sea, and when dialing the wrong phone number leads to a long-time friendship. But first, a preview of Alec Baldwin's first exclusive TV interview with our George Stephanopoulos.
She was someone who was loved by everyone who worked with and liked by everyone who worked with and admired mean, even now, I find it hard to believe that. It just doesn't seem real to me.
You haven't said much in public since that tragic accident. Why speak out now? I think the big question, and the one you must have asked yourself 1,000 times, how could this have happened? You've described it as a 1 in a trillion shot, and the gun was in your hand. How do you come to terms with that? It wasn't in the script for the trigger to be pulled.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them, never.
What did you think happened? How did a real bullet get on that set?
I have no idea. Someone put a live bullet in a gun, a bullet that wasn't even supposed to be on the property.
How do you respond to actors like George Clooney who say that every time they were handed a gun, they checked it themselves? Your emotions are so clearly so right there on the surface. You felt shock, you felt anger, you felt sadness. Do you feel guilt? You said you're not a victim, but is this the worst thing that's ever happened to you?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Because I think back, and I think of what could I have done.
ALEC Baldwin Unscripted, the newsmaking special event. Tomorrow night at 8/7 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
It was a scary time. In the 70s, you had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
There were so many murders happening. You had to have a name for it, serial killer.
There was a human head in there. This was premeditated evil.
You have this clock. This person is going to do this again.
It's me against the killer. Who's going to win?
We'll see who laughs last.
What came next was unlike anything they had ever seen.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I risked my life. I put my family in danger. If I was caught, they would have put a bullet in my head. But it was the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do.
Terror plot foiled in Garden City, Kansas.
That would have been one of the most deadly acts of domestic terrorism ever in the United States. It would have been Oklahoma City.
He put his family, himself in jeopardy for us.
24 hours, Assault on the Capitol, the ABC News original, exclusively on Hulu, now streaming. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
National parks are incredibly safe places, but crime will happen.
Hey, my wife has fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
Well,
Welcome back, everyone. We're tracking several headlines from around the world. The official results are in. The left-leaning Xiomara Castro has been elected as president of Honduras. The win makes her the first woman to achieve the highest office in that nation. Her opponent and mayor of the nation's capital went to Castro's home to concede and congratulate her in person. Castro has promised big changes in Honduras, including a constitutional overhaul, fighting corruption alongside the UN, and loosening restrictions on abortion. The Women's Tennis Association has announced the immediate suspension of all tournaments in China, including Hong Kong, over concerns about the safety of Peng Shuai, the Grand Slam's doubles champion who accused a former high-ranking government official in that country of sexual assault. The CEO of the association says, "While we know where Peng is, I have serious doubts that she is free, safe, and not subject to censorship, coercion, and intimidation." Dramatic video of a 69-year-old man rescued by the Japanese Coast Guard after spending 22 hours on a capsized boat. Take a look at how the man is seen clinging to the boat as rescuers try to save him. Thankfully, he only sustained a minor injury to his left ankle. Well, typically when a wrong number is dialed, it's usually a quick, sorry for the number, sorry for that call. But for one woman in Florida, it changed her life. ABC's Will Gans has the details on how a wrong number connection has turned into a long-time friendship.
It's one thing to pocket dial someone 2 or 3 times, but Gladys Hankerson has spent the last 20 years calling the wrong number. No pocket dial, but a beautiful mistake that's turned into an unlikely friendship. 2 decades ago, Gladys in Florida trying to call her sister in Maryland, but kept dialing area code 401 instead of 410. Mike Moffitt from Rhode Island on the other end of the phone.
Kind of raised by my dad, you always answer your phone. You never know who it is.
So he picked up.
"Oh, sweetheart, I got the wrong number," and hung up real quick, and did that a couple more times that day. And then, the next week, same thing, maybe the next month.
Gladys kept calling and Mike kept answering.
Finally, I just grabbed it. So, wait, before you go, who are you? Where are you from? What are you trying to do? And we just started talking.
I told him, "I'm sorry." I said, "I'm trying to call my sister." He said, "This is Mike." I said, I lost my son, passed away." He said, "I'm so sorry." And he talked real nice to me, and I talked nice to him. And after that, I had his phone number, and I put it down on the paper, and I always called it him.
Gladys going through a difficult time in her life, divorce and a death in the family. But her long-distance friend on the phone always lifting her spirits.
During the time I was downhearted, and he felt my sympathy and everything, lifted me up.
When Mike and his family were in Florida over the Thanksgiving holiday, he surprised Gladys at her home in Delray Beach.
He just walked in and he says, "I'm Mike from Rhode Island." And she just threw her hands up and she said, "I'm blessed."
Oh, it was such a great day. That made my day.
Now Gladys says Mike feels more like family than anything else.
I wish more people could be like that, That'd be so nice. The world will be better, too. People will be better.
Wrong number, but the right answer. Our thanks to Will Gans for that. And that is our show for tonight. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.
It was an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed